You're listening to Coffee with Innovate Finance, where we speak with experts from the industry on the changing face of financial services and the future of fintech and financial innovation. I am Rashi Pandey, Head of Membership and Growth, and I'm very pleased to be joined by Ian Sutherland, who is the CFO and Head of Net Zero at Tide. So, Tide, as many of us know, is a business financial platform and the leading provider of digital business banking services in the UK. So, thank you so much for joining us today, Ian.
Thanks for having me. It's really great to be here.
It really is. So, being a CFO and the head of Net Zero at the same time at Tide, what does your day look like?
So I've been the CFO at Tide for 5 years now. I'm fully enjoying the fintech journey of a growth business. For a couple of years, we've been thinking about our own net zero policies. So I've led into that topic quite substantially, and over time was sucked into it because I'm really passionate about solving the climate crisis and doing whatever we can. I think Tide has a hugely important place in this ecosystem, particularly because we have over 500,000 of SMEs in the UK now. So we want to make sure that we've thought about net zero in a clear way. So be spending a lot of time on it, and over time that became a role in itself. So not only do I look after the finance at Tide, which is a big there's a big team behind that now at Tide. So we've scaled that very, very well. But the part of the next chapter for me is also thinking about our net zero journey, which I'm happy to be here today to talk to you a little bit more about.
Yes, and I have to say it's been an absolute privilege to see your team grow and to achieve all that you have actually. And you have had very exciting news come out, and that's why we're speaking today. Tide recently became the first fintech in the world to remove 100% of emissions using durable carbon removal. So what does this actually mean?
Yeah, so we've as I said, we've been thinking about this for some time. Obviously we want to figure out for ourselves what net zero means, and so spend a lot of time working with partners and talking to industry about how to go about our net zero journey, which we knew we wanted to do and lead from the front on. So for Tide, that means initially figuring out what was our carbon footprint. That was the first step. It was a clear, obvious thing to do. So we partnered with a company called Supercritical, who we've been working with for a couple of years now. And that's helped us go on the journey of really understanding where our carbon footprint is and how many tons of carbon Tide as a business emits. So we've been doing that for some time now. We've been reporting to the board on our carbon emissions, and we knew that we wanted to, over time, reduce these. But we also knew that we wanted to become net zero. And so a lot of the thinking we've been doing is to think, clearly along the lines of what does net zero mean? And the more thinking we did about that, the more we wanted to align ourselves with the SBTi guidance around net zero, which states quite clearly that to achieve net zero, you need to reduce your emissions by at least 90 to 97%, depending on which economic basis you look at, but also to remove your carbon footprint with durable carbon removals. And we'll get into a bit more, hopefully, about what that specifically means. But the short story is that we purchased durable carbon removal CDR credits totaling our 2022 emissions, which were 3,711 tons. We did that back end of last year and early this year. So we've now removed 100% of last year's emissions with these durable carbon removals. So that's neutralized our carbon footprint. And as I like to say, it's sort of balanced the books of our carbon neutrality in an effective way, in a way that is leading from the front. And we haven't seen anybody else, do this in fintech. So we're really proud that we've been able to make that step. But this is only the start, and there's a long way to go here. We want to encourage others to do this, and there's a long way for us to go in terms of we want to commit to doing that ongoing forevermore, that we want to remove our emissions, but we also want to reduce and help our members over time to do similar things, on their own net zero journey.
That's really amazing to hear. But I'm sure it did not happen overnight, right? So, what was the journey like to get there? And of course, you guys have expanded globally. So, did having offices globally impact the journey in any way?
Yeah, so the journey was certainly a learning curve for us all, and not least myself. I certainly hadn't spent years in this area beforehand, but now I've sort of got up to speed and been able to report things to our board, and also internally take our tidy-ins along on the same journey about what it means to be net zero. So that's been really important. We couldn't have done it without partners like Supercritical. We also, by the way, had our numbers audited by a third party, so we knew that we wanted to make sure that we were holding ourselves to the highest sort of standards in terms of doing the carbon accounting, and then also holding ourselves to high standards when it comes to removing that carbon. So that's when we decided that we were going to purchase these durable carbon removal credits, which are biochar, which we can talk a bit more about later. So that piece was quite intricate. There had a lot of thinking had to go into whether we were, going to buy tree plantation or do sort of other things that might be less durable in terms of their environmental benefit, but we came to the decision that we wanted to stick to the SBTi guidance around that. So that's been quite important and a big learning for us, which we want to sort of talk about, which is why one of the reasons I'm here. In terms of how that's been like for a global business, we now have offices in 3 primary locations. The UK, obviously. We have a few hundred people in the UK, but we also have a few hundred in Bulgaria, in Sofia. But our largest market now for employee base is India. So we have, over 500 people in India now. So we have a distributed workforce across a number of continents. And that does, require some thought, because ultimately, we don't want to necessarily be traveling all the time. This is one of our biggest lines in our carbon P&L is travel, is business travel. So we were quite thoughtful about this a year or so ago. We came up with, we actually budget our travel based on carbon rather than on pounds, or rupees. So we're basically making sure that our teams have a separate budget which is related to their carbon. We use Travel Perk, for example, as a booking platform, which allows us to accurately measure the carbon costs of each journey. So our teams are able to sort of see what that means in terms of their overall footprint when it comes to business travel. So, and we also have a policy, for example, around that, where if you're going for long haul, we encourage everyone to stay for at least over a weekend for 2 weeks, so that you're maximizing your time in one country and therefore don't have to do so many trips per year. So we're being quite thoughtful about how we manage things as a global business. We're pretty distributed work from home or work remotely workforce, to be honest. We have that policy in place already, so we don't have huge head office costs regarding emissions around heating and electricity in the offices, but we do capture the cost of heating and working from home and things like that. So we have to now be quite thoughtful about what are we going to do to help our employees think about that side of things. Also, if we're moving offices, which we're going to do at some point this year for the UK office, we're one of the key items in that decision tree is really how sort of how sustainable the office environment is there, in terms of the categorization in terms of EPC ratings and BREEAM and things like that. So we're being quite thoughtful about everything really around our working environments and our footprint for our employees going forward. There's lots more initiatives to come, and we welcome any new sort of ideas. There's lots of companies also thinking about this, I'm sure.
That's amazing to hear. Like you said, you guys are definitely being very thoughtful, and mighty impressive. You have 500 people in India now. Congratulations. I didn't know that, actually. And of course, you mentioned biochar. For our audience, for our listeners, for myself, what is biochar?
So biochar is a carbon removal technology it harnesses the carbon cycle by taking green waste, which would otherwise decompose and become carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. You're effectively interrupting that ecological cycle of that green waste decomposing and pyrolyzing it, which is a chemical process where you burn the green waste in a oxygen-free or very limited oxygen container. What that does is creates charcoal, a kind of charcoal, without burning and creating CO2, which effectively captures that carbon for long term. And the great thing about biochar is it's a magic substance because it not only does it capture the carbon and breaks that cycle, so you're removing the carbon from the atmosphere, you have this end product, this byproduct, which is biochar, which is used in agriculture quite a lot to help with providing nutrition to the soil. So it improves farming environments as well, which has a knock-on effect in terms of agriculture ongoing. So it has multiple benefits, and actually in some places in India is a good example. So if they're trying to recycle the soil, they will burn stubs in terms of the remainder of the crops, and that burning cycle does provide the same sort of nutrition to the soil because you're releasing the carbon in the soil, but you're also releasing a huge amount of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, obviously. So you can actually use biochar in theory to cut out that process as well, because you effectively, rather than burning in the open atmosphere, you're burning in pyrolyzers to stop effectively the air pollution and also the effect that would have on the local environment. So we think that in the future, biochar is a very scalable technology, which could be applied in many, many different countries. So we've made our initial investment now, but we're planning to do further investments into this technology, and not just biochar, but other durable carbon removal technologies, which we ultimately think will be a huge part of solving the climate crisis. These sorts of technologies are very nascent, and one of the key things that we've learned is that the marketplace is sort of the kind of economic drivers for businesses at the moment. It doesn't really exist as an industry so far. There's no real scale in this because I think there hasn't been enough spotlight shone on the fact these technologies are so effective in the climate crisis. So we wanted to, we want to be part of that journey. If people are interested, there's a great website called cdr.fyi, and you can see on there the open source information of all of the carbon credits that have ever been purchased. And so Tide are in there as we made one of the most significant purchases ever. But Tide isn't a huge multinational company, unlike some of the companies on there. Microsoft and things like this. There are businesses on there who are obviously giant businesses who have made large purchases, but it's not that the whole economy is doing this. So we think there's a long way to go in terms of developing a solution for the climate crisis, and we want to be part of investing in that.
Thank you for explaining what really is, and your process and your work within it as well. And actually, I think it follows beautifully to my next question. Actually, why is net zero a priority for you guys, and what does it really mean for your SME members and clients? And why should net zero be a priority for fintechs in general?
I think in general, ultimately we want to do the right thing. It's clear that the world needs to take collective action, and if we don't act, there's a lot being said, but we think that there's not enough action. So we wanted to make sure that we were doing something that had a meaningful impact, but also showed others a way to do that. So really we're coming at it from a perspective of, obviously there's something we want to do here. It's a huge problem. We all collectively need to do something. Fintechs and tech in general can lead from the front because we're sort of faster moving environments. We can adopt these policies, these changes more quickly than, let's say, a much larger organization probably could. And so we were privileged enough to be in that position for sure. However, we want to make sure that we're leading from the front, and then it's not just for us about fintech, it's about the SME economy as a whole. I mean, the sort of emissions and the economy of the UK, for example, about 50% of that comes from SMEs. So, there's a huge part that SMEs will have to play in the transition to net zero. And so we're really committed to supporting, not just leading from the front from fintech, from a tech perspective, but also to filter that down into the wider economy, and particularly into SMEs.
Perfect. And there has been rising backlash against greenwashing related to corporate net zero claims. How has that informed your own commitment?
Yes, of course. And, one of the things we want to be able to do is always back up our what we're doing with the data, to really kind of say, this is what we've done. We've had we've calculated our emissions. We've even gone so far as having that audited by a third party. We've been very thoughtful about what we've purchased in terms of the carbon removal credits. These are registered in a registry and have been retired forevermore. So, there's things you can do to legitimize the efforts. I think that in the past, probably some of that has been not so possible or achievable, but the technology, the ability, the understanding, the whole ecosystem has moved on a lot over the last decade. And we fundamentally believe now is a time when you can attain credibility. You can, by being deliberate about what you do, by being very transparent. That's very key. We're open to being challenged on anything we do. We want to be transparent. It has been a very conscious effort for us to make sure that we're doing the right thing. But that's not to say that we're the only ones who can do the right thing. There's other ways to do this. This is a path we've carved with guidance around SBTI, by talking to industry leaders and these sorts of things. So we think that there's a emerging way to think about this, but that could change over time, and we'll be led by data. We will always do the right thing based on the prevailing wisdom of the top minds in this space.
And you're also currently calling for fintech companies to take full advantage of emerging durable carbon removal marketplace. So why are so few companies buying durable carbon removals? What do you think are the barriers?
I think honestly, it took us a long time to understand what's the difference between a durable carbon removal versus, let's say, a green carbon removal where you're planting trees. Ultimately, I think the science thinking around this leads the way. That's where the Science-Based Targets Initiative comes from, when it's saying to guarantee the durability, to guarantee the longevity of your carbon removal purchases and what you're doing there, you need to think about the permanence. So green removal technology where you're planting trees is great, and it's better absolutely than doing nothing. However, that you cannot guarantee the longevity of a tree through disease or fire, or the fact that at the end of its life it's likely to be cut down and not necessarily replanted. So those things are not going to 100% remove the carbon in our sort of medium-term timescales. So durable carbon removal, that sort of definition is at least 100 years or more in terms of durability, in terms of longevity. And so we're led a bit by the science there. It took us a while to understand this, and particularly myself, it is a more expensive way to purchase removal technology. So that's a barrier. There is a barrier about cost here. And so, but the market is very nascent. And so really, we have to take a lead. We have to make a stand. So the more people invest in this technology, the more there will be supply. At the moment, there is too limited supply. There's actually reasonable amount of demand, but the supply is probably the main problem. And if the supply could increase, the price would come down. And so therefore it become more affordable to do this versus other technologies. So really there's a bit of a challenge there that needs to be navigated, but it requires cross business thinking. It requires probably, I would like to think, some government intervention as well in due course. It hasn't happened today, sadly, with the Green Day announcements that we saw in the UK. But hopefully in the future we'll start to see more thinking around this hugely important topic, because, like I said earlier, technology can be a huge part of solving the problem, and we'll put our minds to it as a, as a race. We'll figure out, as a humans will figure out this problem with technology. I'm certain of that. That's what we've done throughout time.
Throughout history, yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Throughout history, we've always solved problems with technology, and that's one of the reasons I sit here working in a tech company, is that I believe in technology. I believe it solves a problem, and ultimately, I believe fundamentally that the problem of climate change can be in part solved by technology. It's not only going to be solved by technology. We need to change our behaviors. We need to reduce our emissions. There's lots of other things to do here, but a big part of it will be figuring out ways to capture carbon in an efficient way. So let's see more of that happening, and encourage all fintechs and all tech businesses to learn more on this topic. And very happy to speak to anyone who's listening to this podcast about it if they so choose to reach out to me.
You listeners heard it. You know where to find Ian. But thank you for sharing. And as they say, right, necessity is the mother of invention. And that has been the truth pretty much, especially when it comes to technology. And I guess as an industry, we have to start somewhere, right? At the end of the day.
Yes, we have to start doing and not talking. So
exactly.
This is
actions speak louder than words. I have a lot of idioms coming out of me today. But there have also been some great progress from cross-industry groups like Bankers for Net Zero. What are they doing in this space?
Yeah, so we've been working with Bankers for Net Zero for a few years now as well. They're a cross-party group helping to navigate this topic of how banks can support not just SMEs, but banks in general can support retail, SMEs, corporates to actually help everyone on the journey to net zero. And banks definitely have a part to play, not least in terms of green finance, and finding ways to provide lending for green finance initiatives around, whether that's solar panels or retrofitting, heat pumps, etc. So there's a lot that can be done in the banking and the finance industry as a whole to actually accelerate the net zero initiatives in the UK and beyond. And they'd be great to work with. So we get a seat at the table to kind of talk about these things and be able to sort of, in doing so, potentially help influence policy. And so we get a seat at the table to do that, which is absolutely brilliant. There's a new project being kicked off this year specifically around SMEs, which Tide are very supportive of and are going to get involved with. And that's incredibly exciting. So that's, again, another initiative that will accelerate the journey for SMEs on net zero as well. So these things are there. There are plenty of initiatives going on. I think that the next phase, as we are unlocking technology that can really support and fintechs in particular, and banks who are becoming more like fintechs, can actually support their customers with technology. I think it's going to become even more pertinent that we have a sort of ability to speak about policy, about frameworks. There's a lot still to be done about standardizing the way we calculate the carbon emissions. There is not really a one source of truth on that at this point in time. There is not really one standard that everyone uses. I'm personally passionate as an accountant myself. I'm personally passionate about helping to solve that problem if we can, help there. So there's a lot to be done, and lots of people are thinking about it. I think that there's more. The way I see it now is there is more happening. There's more doing than talking than there was, let's say, a couple of years ago when we first started talking about it. So I'm excited for the future there too.
And that's amazing, right? That's how the industry is built as well. And, before I let you go, just two very quick questions for you as well. I know you have mentioned this a little, but if you can elaborate a little more, and how do you think as an industry, what can we do more to get towards a net zero world?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think to finish up here and really for Tide, the way Tide are going to approach this for SMEs, let me tell you, our plans there. We really want to help any SME come to Tide and figure out their own carbon footprint, because that's the thing that needs to be demystified. It's very difficult for people to do that today. So whether that's a consumer app or a SME app, there are ways to do it. So leaning into that and helping businesses, consumers, individuals, corporates figure out their own carbon footprint is step one. Then that allows them to have the data to be able to say, right, here are my emissions. These are the top 5 categories, and then provide different tools and different thinking around how we might be able to reduce those emissions over time. At the same time as that, we want to be able to offer our members the tools to be able to purchase removals, if they so choose, to help them on their net zero journey. So we're doing a number of initiatives there around that whole framework of being able to help an SME understand more. I think that demystifying is a big part of solving the problem, because it is a bit daunting. I mean, we've been on a journey for 2 years now, and it took us a long time to get to where we are. But I think technology will help solve that problem for people in a mass market way. More specifically, we've recently acquired a business called Funding Options, who are a lending platform, and they had a really good chat with them recently. They have also a green finance initiative around trying to find ways to help SMEs get more finance that's helping them support green initiatives. Now, I can see that there are challenges there. That in particular, there are not enough green finance solutions for the smaller end of the SME market, for the micro SME, whether that's to buy solar panels or to invest in, retrofitting, buildings, to invest in air source heat pumps, anything that can provide, greener transport technology like electric vehicles. These sorts of things are not readily available as financial lending capability today. And so the more we can see that, and I think in particular, the more the government can do to kind of support the finance industry as a whole to be able to offer more competitive terms when it comes to green finance, that will really accelerate things, not just in SME, but also in consumer. So I don't think there was enough announced on Green Day by the government. I think that they have missed a little bit of a trick in terms of what we can do to accelerate things on the whole. Some good stuff was announced, but I think there's more that can be done there, and we'd like to see more of that in the future.
Yeah, there's always more that we can do, of course, and it's an extremely important initiative, which every industry, every company should be taking, and everybody as an individual, on an individual level as well. And Ian, before I let you go, before we close, any words of advice you would like to pass on to your fellow colleagues in fintech who are basically on the ESG journey right now?
Sure. I mean, as I said before, anyone who's kind of interested in this, please feel free to reach out through LinkedIn. I'm available there. Happy to share more thoughts on that. I'm speaking at an event for CFOs soon. So I'm sharing my journey. I think it's important that we do that. My advice is, if you're passionate about this, find the first step really is to help to get your sort of colleagues or your board, your CEOs involved, and help them understand the topic by first of all calculating your emissions. There are lots of great companies out there who can help you do that, and that would be your first step. And it's becoming a lower barrier to entry all of the time. So I think that is something that everyone can be doing today. And ultimately, in the end, we're going to. I think that it will quite rightly end up with being a sort of more of a mandatory thing. So the sooner people do it, the better. And that's the first step. And then there's lots of things that we can do about thinking about our own reductions over time, travel policies and all the rest of it. So yeah, I think the first thing to do is do something, and then take it from there.
basically start the journey and then
Right.
contact Ian on LinkedIn. That's what I would say. No, but that's amazing. Thank you so much, Ian, for speaking with us today. And thank you for sharing Tide's inspiring journey towards net zero with us.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me. It's been really good to chat.
Yes, and for those on this journey, please feel free to reach out to the team at Tide, to us at Innovate Finance. This is a cause just close to all our hearts. And here's to a net zero future, right? At the end of the day. Thank you again, Ian. And to our listeners, thank you once again for tuning into Coffee with Innovate Finance. Do look out for upcoming episodes and follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn for more on our events and programs. As always, until next time, please take very good care of yourselves.